Hi, I'm John Hennessey, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Well, that roaring sound you hear in the distance is not a rocket launching. Chances are it's someone strapped into a Venom F5 and burning up tires, tearing up asphalt in something called a Hennessey. And he's the creator of all of this raw energy. John Hennessey, thank you for taking your foot off the accelerator to join us today. How are you?
Doing great. It's my honor to be with you guys.
We're going to get to that Venom in a little bit, but I want to
Sure.
start off with, can you believe it's been 31 years?
I
I mean, I
can. It
remember when the
seems like it's
Hennessy
flown
came
by.
out, but it's
Mhm.
crazy, right? 3 decades of doing this.
It is crazy. It's funny that we started our business towards the end of 1991, about 2 weeks after I got married and got back from my honeymoon. And it's been pretty much a wild ride. And if my wife was on this podcast, she could give you a lot more detail on that.
You're a high performance guy, but give us a bit of a background on how the performance bug bit you. What inspired you?
I guess if it goes back to childhood before I can even remember, my dad was a car guy. He had a 64 and a half Pontiac GTO with a 4 speed and a 389 tri-power engine. And, I'm told that when I could sit in his lap, he would have me shifting gears when I was, could barely even walk. So I think it was kind of just programmed into my DNA from an early age. And as I grew up and was in school, I wanted to be an astronaut and wanted to be a fighter pilot. And years later, that those aspirations didn't quite work out, but it was kind of cool to see that come full circle. When in 2014, we're setting a speed record at the NASA shuttle landing runway down in Florida with our Venom GT. So it's funny how life works. Sometimes you get inspired by things and dream big, and then life takes its twists and turns. But sometimes some of those initial ambitions and inspirations can kind of you can take root in certain passions in our life. And I guess as I kept in high school, I was into motorcycles, bought my own car, 69 442 convertible, did all that with my own money. My parents didn't have much money back in those days. And so as I tried different things as I'm getting older, I just kept really just found a love for not only speed and performance and tinkering with cars, but also the people, the community that comes along with that, and guys like Bruce Meyer we were talking about earlier. And again, fast forward 31 years of doing this as our source of income and how we've raised our family and put them through college. But again, at its core, it all started back with Ricky Bobby here wanted to go fast. And at one time, and my quick story for 1991 was I bought a car, Mitsubishi 3000 GT. I read about a guy named C. Van Toon, who at one time was the editor at Motor Trend magazine. And before he did all that, he bought an Eagle Talon, put a roll cage in it, and he raced up Pikes Peak. And so I'm reading about this guy, C. Van Toon, going to Pikes Peak with his street car in 1990. And I thought, well, if that guy did it, maybe I can too. So I wanted to go race at Pikes Peak. And I raced at Pikes Peak. I didn't win anything, but I didn't crash. And I did it back when it was all dirt. So that's pretty cool. I raced at Bonneville, set a class record there. And I also set a speed record out at a race in Nevada. They still have it called the Silver State Classic. And after all that, I'm doing all this. And I'm not doing my construction business back in these days. I'm engaged. I get married. And I learned the first rule of car racing. And that is, if you want to make a small fortune in car racing, you start with a larger fortune. As I'm watching my bank balance, going down over the course of 1991. Again, we go on our honeymoon and we come back and bought a house. And I told my wife, Hope, I said, I really like this car thing. I like tinkering with my car. I like racing. I like the people. I said, there's a couple of guys like Alois Roof, Carol Shelby, obviously, Reese Calloway, had seemed to, make a pretty good mark for themselves and make pretty good living at modifying cars. And I thought, well, maybe somebody with a Mitsubishi 3000 GT or a Dodge Stealth would pay me to modify their cars. And that's kind of where it began. And here we are 31 years later, and I think we're over 14,000 vehicles we've modified during that time. Pretty crazy.
You missed one part of the story. Your mother had a Volkswagen Bug, had a
Oh,
parked in the
yeah, okay.
driveway,
All right. I
and
didn't know if you knew about that. I wasn't going to go too far off into the weeds
share
on
that
that. And
story.
I'll tell that story real quick. So great research. I'm impressed. So I have had two twin sisters. They were both babies. So I'm 2 years older, so I'm probably in my terrible twos. And so I think my dad was out of town. My mom was loading us up in her VW Bug and parked in the driveway on a hill. And she puts me in the car. Then she goes in and gets one sister, brings her, puts her in the car, goes back in the house, and I'm just, got hold of the steering wheel and I'm pretending to drive it 2+ years of age. And so I guess she comes back out with my other sister, and the car is not there anymore. And this is Kansas City, so this is 71st Street and Mission. If anybody listening from the Kansas City area, so right there in Prairie Village, and we're right across the street from a church. And so I guess I was able to get off, take the e-brake off, and pop the transmission out of gear, and the car just rolled straight across a pretty busy street into a church parking lot, and probably a good 100 yards on the other side of the church parking lot. If she comes a running, and she said that she comes to me, and there I am looking at her and holding on to the steering wheel, and said, "Car goes boom, mama. The car goes boom, mama." So yeah, the car's been going boom ever since then.
I think the car's been going boom, and I would argue that you
Yeah.
actually became an astronaut because when strapped into a Hennessey, you kind of are flying.
Well, yeah, we could talk about that. If you look at the design of the steering wheel and really the driver focus on the F5 specifically, we felt like with the yoke design and the steering wheel, it's something that we did completely independent of whatever Tesla was doing. But we really felt like, at speeds potentially approaching 300 miles per hour, you're maybe as much of a pilot as you are an actual driver. So having your focus on looking at the road and having the relevant information that you need to drive safely. But yeah, being a very driver focused car and seeing where you're going, because you're going to get there quickly.
But once again, here you go. You were going to be an astronaut. You also wanted to be a pilot, and you just described, the cockpit being in that, very kind of airplane-like mode. And
Yes.
you had 5 or 6 hours of seat time. Didn't have the money to finally get a pilot's license, but at least you had that. You've had this thrill of speed in you for a long time. Back to
I have, and
back to the
again,
2-year-old.
sure, yeah, no, man, I've always loved anything that moves or has speed, and cars were kind of, I think, my first passion. A little bit with motorcycles. I had motorcycles before I could afford a car, just to have transportation when I was in high school. But in my 20s, early 20s, I barely had enough money for aviation ground school. So the first time in my life, I got straight A's at college, and I didn't have the money to finish the flying part of it. But I really enjoyed that. It was interesting, after that exposure to aviation, I still kind of came back to automotive as kind of always been my number one hobby and my number one love. And feel very fortunate that I was able to turn that into a career and raise a family, and have several businesses now where we're pushing, gosh, we're 85 employees. We'll probably be pushing 100 employees by the end of the year. So now it's kind of come full circle, and I see our employees at events and their wives, and their wives are pregnant and having babies. So I'm thinking there's a lot more to this versus just my, Ricky Bobby wanting to go fast and win some races back in 1991.
I want to. This is not. This is your life or anything like that. But I want to go back to one childhood
Okay.
story,
Sure.
and it was your dad with his '68 Pontiac GTO, and you're about 10 or
Yeah.
11. And by the way, that
Yeah.
GTO had a dual gate shifter, and you're supposed to be home at a certain time, but you're hanging out down the
Yeah.
road, and Dad comes looking for you,
Yeah.
and he rolls down the window and he says, and we're on Sirius Radio here, so he says, "Get your ass
Sure.
home."
Right.
But what does he do when he pops that car into gear?
So he says, "Get your ass home." And I knew I was supposed to be home, and I knew I was in trouble, but I didn't think he'd come looking for me. And I'm not sure exactly why I needed to be home, but it was dinner time or something was going on. And so I'm just hanging out with my junior high buddies, or fifth grade buddies, I guess it might have been. And when he pulled up, I go to, like, I'm gonna go get in the car, and he takes that Hurst dual gate and moves it over one notch and slaps it down in the first gear. And as I'm going to, like, reach the door, thankfully before I grabbed the door handle, he wasn't gonna give me a ride home. I had to walk home. And he just does about a 150-foot burnout with two little 70 series black stripes on the street. And I kind of went from, like, thinking, okay, I'm in really deep crap with the old man, and I look around at my buddies, and they're all like, "Man, that's really cool." And I thought, "Oh gosh, wow, I can be cool to my friends. Maybe if someday, if I've got a really cool car that does burnouts and makes really cool sounds." So I guess that was just something, maybe subliminally, I kind of thought, okay, back in those days, I'm not, I'm kind of a smaller guy in the class and kind of the last guy, and not one of the last guys to get picked on dodgeball, kickball. But I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe my cool status might go up a little bit if I end up with a cool car and can do those kind of things, which is exactly kind of what happened a few years later.
So instead, ironically, John, you've created a business where a lot of other people can have cool cars. And
Yeah,
and that's got to be the ethos, the vision for this enterprise that you've now built some 30 years later.
yeah. I think again, kind of early on, the knowledge experience that I had gained from modifying my own car, after racing it and beating on it and testing it extensively, I felt like I had a pretty good formula. And I thought, sure, somebody else can just go try modifying their own car, but maybe some people are willing to pay for somebody that has the experience and knows how to do it properly and not overdo it or not break it. And so I think again, early on, we found a formula where, whether it's the 3000 GT back then and then evolving to the Dodge Viper and then Mustangs, Camaros, Corvettes, and now I think last month we built 56 vehicles, and 40 plus of those vehicles were pickup trucks. So the new Raptor, the new T-Rex Ram truck, Broncos, things of that nature. But our clients come to us because they want a turnkey solution. They want something that's more fun, sounds better, that's more engaging to drive, but they also want the peace of mind that comes with a vehicle that was built with a lot of experience and comes with a warranty and passes smog and runs on pump gas. So it's been interesting to kind of see how that evolved, but that ethos and that, how we would pick our product back in the day, it was pretty much like, hey, is this a cool car? Is this a car that I like personally? Is this a car that we like as a company? And then secondarily, is there demand? I remember when the Dodge Viper first came out, and it was the 92, it came out in 93. And for, obviously regulatory reasons, the exhaust was very constrictive. So people would say it sounded like a UPS truck or sound like a vacuum cleaner. And so first thing we did was make an upgraded stainless steel exhaust system. And, they just sold like hotcakes. I mean, we sold them to guys like Bob Lutz when he was president of Chrysler and executives at the company at that time. So again, I feel very fortunate that we've been able to find niches in the market, vehicles that we've been able to modify successfully. And I think somewhere along the way, I think I've been modifying cars for 5 years. We'd been on a few of the magazine covers back in the 90s and Motor Trend, Car and Driver, Road and Track. And I remember the manufacturers, the OEMs would have people in their marketing department that they would classify as a brand manager. I'm like, brand? What's brand? We a brand? And I kept thinking, after time, people kept asking for us and referring to our modified Viper. We coined the term Venom 500 and then Venom all the way up to 1,000 horsepower over the years. And so I think I kind of learned another interesting lesson along the way, that if we can take, a really cool car or truck from the factory and optimize and add performance stuff maybe that the factories would like to do, but maybe for different regulatory or cost savings reasons, they're not able to do it or not able to do it in volume. And we can untap that horsepower and deliver it in an exciting and reliable package, but also give it a really cool name. And that kind of came about like with the Venom, that was strong. And then one of the big brand names that and these are all names that we have trademarked. But I remember if you remember back in 2018 and Dodge was teasing the demon's coming. And every week there was some little Tim Kuniskis and his people were marketing some sort of cool feature to the Demon. I was getting ready for work one morning and I get out of the shower and I said to my wife, I said, the Demon needs a rival, and that rival needs to be called the Exorcist. So this is I think the only car where I had a cool name and I didn't know if I could trademark it or not. We were able to trademark it. But I roll into the shop. I'm like, I got this great idea for this rival for the Demon, and the rivalries create relevance, and we're going to build something. And I'm not sure what it was. I just said to my team, I'm like, okay, what can we modify? Might it be a Mustang? Could, Camaro? And they're like, well, the new ZL1 Camaro comes with the LT4 engine, and we've already been doing 1,000 horsepower in the C7 Corvette and the Z06 with the same LT4. And I'm like, that's it. So we came up with the logo and badged it. So again, I think that's another, as time has gone on, that has been again, this feedback we get from our clients. They pull into the gas station, they're picking their kids up from school, they're at the mall parking lot or whatever, and somebody says, oh, you have an Exorcist, oh, you have a Venom. I think that's been a cool, just part of what we do. And again, we can't always do that, but we try to have some sort of a cool, interesting name. And it's hard to come up with cool names, because just when you think you've come up with a good name, then it's a pretty good chance that somebody else has already thought of it or trademarked it, but we've been very fortunate. Velociraptor, obviously Venom GT, Venom F5, Venom Twin Turbo Viper, things of that nature. But that's, again, I think that's just part of the fun factor that our clients identify with and really enjoy, and it's brought us opportunity to build more and more vehicles.
On your highway to success, I want to talk about a couple of milestones, and one of them you just mentioned too, the Venom, and you were running 0 to 60 in the mid to low 3-second range back when the Venom 500 was out.
Sure.
You know, the Viper, but then you built the 800 horsepower twin turbo, eventually 1,000 horsepower, and you did a race with Road and Track magazine.
Yes.
And you brought the twin turbo Viper to a runway in California, and you're going to see which car was the quickest to 200 miles an hour. So you go head to head, not with an average vehicle, just a Bugatti Veyron.
Right. Yeah,
and
sure.
You did 0 to 200 in 20 seconds, and the pokey little Bugatti did it in 24. And
yeah, it was a good day.
Yeah, and I think and that's got to be a moment when you reflect back that is a milestone for the company as a whole. It's validation of everything that you're doing, right, John?
It is. It was, and when we got that invitation from the Road and Track guys, I thought, man, Bugatti Veyron all-wheel drive, 1,000 horsepower. I knew we had it on power to weight ratio, but I knew that we'd also be a little bit challenged on putting that power down to the ground, at least until we got the car up over 100. But at the end of the event and cover the magazine and beating the Bugatti by 4 seconds, and the owner of that car, he left the event early. He wasn't too happy about the results.
I can imagine.
But what's funny was, so we've had we had that opportunity with Road and Track, and I think, again, kind of part of our DNA is that we like to celebrate victories and successes, but we don't rest on our laurels for too long. So we're always, to coin a phrase, looking for the next mountain to climb. It was sometime after that we started thinking about, okay, well, what can we build? I know we can add more horsepower, but can we build something with lighter weight? And I thought, whether it's a Viper or back then a C6 Corvette or the 0506 Ford GT, I thought, a street car, you can maybe take upwards of a couple 100 pounds out of it, but at some point it makes that harsh transition from a nice street car to a race car. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want our customers to have full air conditioning, full interior, comfortable seats. And so I was joking with some of my team about, well, what if we take a Lotus Elise or an Exige and we took the little Toyota 4-cylinder out of the back of that thing and we put our 1,000 horsepower twin turbo, Venom engine in there. We kind of joked about it. And I had a designer in the UK who was doing some design work for me, and I had him do kind of just a rough sketch of what it would look like. I'm like, oh, wow, that actually looks kind of cool. I said, what would you charge me to do a set of renderings where proportionally packaging wise, again, without getting into CAD or CATIA, what do you think it would look like if we really tried to build that car? And so he sent me some renderings, and this is the end of 2007. And I'm at the SEMA show, and I've got 5 kids back at home, and I've got a bunch of kid birthdays that are all kind of the end of October and early November, plus Halloween. So I got to get home. And journalist Mike Spinelli came and stuck a camera in my face and said, hey, Hennessey, what's new? And I just reached in my backpack and I said, well, hey, here's the Venom GT concept car. It's going to have 1,000 horsepower, blah, blah, blah. It was just some crazy idea on a whim. And so a couple of days later, that gets published on the internet, and 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from a guy in Dubai who wanted to order one. And so, again, that just leads to the story of the Venom GT. There was no real business plan to it. It was just kind of a crazy idea that I made the unintentional, I won't say mistake, but spontaneously just shared it with the media. And next thing I knew, somebody wanted to buy it.
Yeah, but there was an issue with that car, right? Because when you decided to move forward with it, it only, by the time you built it, it was costing you 4 times what the first guy paid for it.
That's correct. So
so moment for Hennessey.
The other issue with the car was the owner. So we give him a price, and we think we have a budget, and we'll talk about that in a second. And about 6 months into the project, he passes away in a helicopter crash.
Mm.
And now I had to wait to find out if his family wanted to cancel the order or confirm the order. They came back and said, hey, look, we want you to build a vehicle. We want to put it in our family collection as a tribute to our brother. And so we ended up moving forward with it. But yes, once we got into the harsh reality of it, the budget to build the car and design the car and all the tooling and engineering was 4 times what I had originally anticipated. So, at this point, I'm like, Cortez had already burned the ships, so to speak. So I'm like, we just have to sell more cars, which is what we did, and we ended up building a dozen Venom GTs, and the first 6 were the coupe, the last 6 were the Spider, and then the coupe went 20 in 2014, ran 270.4 miles per hour one way at NASA, beating Bugatti Veyron Super Sport by just a little bit, and then a couple years later in 2016, and this is something that, yeah, it got some coverage in the media, but I thought it was kind of a bigger deal than when we beat the Veyron the first time. Bugatti also held the record for the fastest convertible, so open top car, and they took their, I believe it was the Veyron Grand Sport Vitesse, which was their 1,000+ horsepower convertible roadster, and they went 254 miles per hour with it one way. They didn't run 2 average on that car either. I thought that'd be kind of fun to beat that. So we went back to Lemoore Naval Air Station in California, where that road and track test was a few years before. And with the roof off, the Venom GT Spider ran 265.5 miles per hour, so almost 11 miles per hour faster than the Bugatti. That record still stands today. Now, there are people that argue, well, Koenigsegg is a convertible, but I'm just saying we're us and Bugatti, as far as I know, are the only 2 companies crazy enough to actually take the roof off and say, let's see how fast this car will go minus the roof. And again, that record has stood now for roughly 6 years. And then coincidentally, we're going to be unveiling our Venom F5 Roadster at the Quail during Car Week next week. And so we're in no big hurry, but at some point we'll see what the F5 Roadster may run with the roof off, but I think it might go a little faster than 265. But it's that kind of stuff can be dangerous, so we have to be very careful about the venue and doing that. But we spent a lot of time and money and talent engineering that car, so I feel pretty good about it. Will it go 300 with the roof up? I don't know that we want to try to do that, but I think it will go something better than 265, so we'll see.
And the F5 itself is a defining moment in Hennessey's development.
It's a crazy story. Yes.
Tell me the story.
It is a defining moment, but I think that the people that know me know that I like a challenge, and there's probably times in the company history where I took on a challenge and didn't really, it's one of those deals where we didn't know what we didn't know, and if I had known better, maybe I might not have done it. So I guess it all ended up working out. But in the case of the Venom F5, back in, oh gosh, when that car came out, we delivered the first car around 2010, and the last car, I think it was 2014 or 2015. Somewhere along that way, that again, we took a Lotus Elise or Exige, and we basically threw away 90% of the car. We kept the cockpit, we kept the tub, because I didn't have the time or the budget to develop our own tub. That's something we did later on in F5. But back then it worked for us. It was lightweight, it was compact, and it was fairly rigid. And everything in front of the dash was new, and everything literally from behind the seats, we built our own new bulkhead and chassis behind it. So I'm like, I kind of feel like that's 90% of our car. So maybe we kept, again, the Lotus tub, the headlights, taillights. But when some haters on the internet or social media would see the car, they're like, "Oh, it's just a modified Lotus." And I'm like, "No, there's a lot more that's gone into it than that." Anyway, I guess reading that a few times, it irritated me, and I thought, okay, well, I'll change the headlights. I'll change some of the design where it doesn't look as much like a Lotus. And I shared it with a friend of mine, a customer of mine. This gentleman, I can't say his name, but he recently retired as chief marketing officer for one of the most successful companies in history. And I shared my Venom GT Evolution images.
You've been on the record that was Phil Schiller.
Well, I probably have been on the record, but I probably shouldn't have said that.
At least I read that.
So anyway, so you might have read that. But anyway, so it was again a guy that I highly respect, and I refer to him and a few other clients like him as the best consultants that I could never afford to hire. He was very kind, but he was also very direct. And he basically said, "John, if you want to get credit, you're not going to get credit for having your own car design until you design your own car." And coming from a guy that is speaking truth to me, I wasn't prepared for the truth, and I felt like I'd been kicked in the nads a little bit. But I put my big boy pants on, and I'm like, he's right. And so that journey kind of began, and just in terms of thinking about Venom F5, and then we partnered with Shell. Shell became an important partner of ours on the Venom GT program in 2014, as well as the convertible run in 2016. And around about that time, I said, we've had some really cool success, and you guys just kind of joined us in testing their lubricants and fuels on the Venom GT. But I said, we have another car that I think it's going to be several levels above where we were able to go with Venom GT, so an F5. And so they said, hey, look, we like what you're doing, and we're willing to give you some budget and some resources, and basically no strings attached. Like, you go build a cool car, and if you are able to tell your story about how you utilize our fuels and lubricants, and so be it. And that's kind of where. So in 2017, we were able to build a full-scale design model, a one-to-one design model of the Venom F5 that we had unveiled at the SEMA show in Las Vegas. And prior to that, I had a couple clients that believed in the program and gave us orders. But I'm kind of like I love the car, and I believe in the car, and I'm confident we can build it and achieve what we believe we can build in terms of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, power to weight ratio of any car ever built, plus 300 mile per hour capability, which we're still working towards. So, but I don't know if anybody else is going to love it. And I've learned over time that, like, okay, maybe I've got a pretty high batting percentage of what I think other people like, but I don't always know until I show them. And so when we unveiled the car, gosh, within 30 days, I think we had another 5 or 6 orders. So I'm like, okay, now we have critical mass. I have proven demand. I've got signed contracts. I've got paid deposits. But now we have to do the hard work, which is the engineering. And so basically we embarked on the engineering part of the car in 18, 19. And then obviously in 20, COVID hit, and we ended up basically finishing the first car. I guess COVID hit in March, and we unveiled the first car in December of 20. And that was, that was its challenge all along. And if I go back to 2017, when they did the design model, the exterior design of the car. So in August of 17, our house where we raised our kids was flooded by Hurricane Harvey, and we were basically homeless for a better part of a month. And so we're living in a hotel, and we're living with our great friends that had a ranch house, and we stayed in the upstairs of the ranch house. And God was able to bring us a house to rent that would take kids and four dogs. And so it was just really kind of I didn't know if we would have the design model done for SEMA. We literally were photographing that car at Thermal on the Monday of SEMA week. I think we unveiled on a Wednesday, and I remember just driving from Thermal to Vegas and unveiling the car. So it was just pretty surreal. And just during that time with the flood, and it was a huge financial loss for me and my wife. And again, we just we had such great partners, whether it's Shell Pennzoil or our employees or the people that we work with. And then kind of fast forward, so during that time on 18 through 20, again, it's building a hypercar. I like to use the analogy, it's like building a house. It's going to cost twice as much and take twice as long, but you can actually multiply that by many factors. And somewhere along the way, we decided, okay, we're not going to use anybody else's chassis. We're going to build our own chassis. And that was just like its own separate, expensive, time-consuming, deeply engineered process. But we unveiled the car in the end of 2020. It's during COVID. Our business, our car and truck modification business, actually, after a month or two of COVID, I think we grew 23% on that side of the business in 2020. Again, we're unveiling the car. We're unveiling it virtually. Geneva had been shut down previous that year. There was no car week in 2021, or was there? I don't remember. I don't think there was in 2021.
Yeah, I don't.
No, there
think so.
was last year, of course. Well, last year,
Right,
last year we were at, there wasn't car week in 2020. Excuse me. And so anyway, and so it was, I thought, okay, look, the car looks amazing and it runs, and we really haven't got into the validation or testing part of the car yet. But boy, golly, as soon as we showed the car to the world, we sold more cars. And then at the culmination and this is the Venom F5 Coupe. We go to Car Week a year ago, and we're at Quail, and we make our Car Week Pebble Beach debut when we had 2 cars. And within, I think, 30 days of that event, we ended up selling out all 24 cars. I'm like, wow. Oh my gosh, this is surreal.
You've created a purpose-built American sports car with the F5. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the automotive history books are littered with people who have attempted to do this very thing and succeed long term. Why will you be successful?
I didn't. I'm one of these guys. I guess my wife says I'm definitely the glasses I might look at the glass and see it's half full, but I'm in my brain, I think it's completely full. So maybe I'm a little over optimistic in some scenarios, but I think that passion and kind of that me being able to keep my eye on the prize and know where I want us to go. I don't know always how we're going to get there, but I try. People ask on the F5 what was the biggest challenge, and I said, actually designing, engineering, building the car, it had its challenges, but it wasn't the most difficult thing. I said early on, getting my family, my employees to believe that we could do it. When I would say, "Hey, here's this rent," it was just a sketch or rendering. I'm like, "Hey, we're going to build this car," and they're kind of like, "We know you built the Venom GT, but that's a whole different animal." So getting people to believe, but I think that once we begin building that momentum, and I think again the just the differentiators that we're an American company building these cars in Texas. And look, along the way, I've seen the movies, I've seen Tucker, I've seen the DeLorean documentaries. Whether it's Bricklin and I won't name any of the names, but I think again, automotive history has shown that for some crazy American guy like myself that maybe has more chutzpah than their bank account cash at times. Like that's a tough road to hoe. But I never really thought about again. The old NASA term, failure was really never an option. I mean, I've got 5 kids. They're in private school. They're in college. And I'm thinking we will find a way. Okay? We will find a way. And I think really at the end of the day, it was. I mean, God had allowed this stuff to happen because I mean, again, that flood alone, could have potentially put us out of business just in terms of the financial loss and the distraction from just getting flooded out of your house. In early 2017, business was pretty good, but it wasn't great. But when Ford brought the Gen 2 Ford Raptor out in early 2017, we had done our Velociraptor program for the Gen 1 Raptor, very successful on that. And at the end of 16, I said, okay, here's another crazy idea. Let's take the new Raptor when it comes out and let's give it an extra axle and 2 more wheels and tires. Let's make a 6x6. So basically like an AMG Mercedes 6x6 version, but an American version of that. And let's start with the Raptor. And again, my people are like, you want to do what? I'm like, well, there's this axle I think we can use. And anyway, I've always been fortunate enough to like attract and retain and have talent generally internally, but whether it's with collaborations with other companies and partners where, we ended up being very successful with not only the 6x6, but from 2017 through last year, we've modified about 2,000 Raptors. Well, where was the budget coming from exactly after I've, got to buy a new house after my old flooded house? And I'm like, where exactly is the budget coming for development of the F5? Well, we built and modified a lot of Raptors, and that was very successful. Our customers love those vehicles then, and then we're still building them today, along with a lot of Broncos and T-Rexes and other vehicles. But, again, back to your question, as far as like the automotive history has got a number of guys that had big ideas, but for one reason or another, things didn't work out. So again, I'm not saying like, hey, look, we're, everything's going to be perfect forever. I mean, again, with the economy and coming out of COVID, and right now our supply chain, whether it's our clients being able to buy a Raptor or a T-Rex or a Bronco, or us being able to get parts, business has its challenges. But I feel so fortunate, and I feel like, if we fast forward 25 or 30 years, and I'm still around, and I'm able to be on the lawn at Pebble, and we have 15 or 25, or we have all 24 Venom F5 coupes lined up at the lawn, I'll look back and I'll be able to say that we were successful in that endeavor, not because of me or what I said or did or didn't do, but it was because of our team. And whether it's my family or our 84, 85 plus strong employees, from technicians, the engineers, to design, to finance, to procurement, as well as our partners. It takes a village, and it definitely took a team effort. And would not be here, would not have a forward-looking 10-year product plan with 3 more exciting vehicles coming after F5. I couldn't have done any of that by myself, and I won't be able to do that stuff going forward. It's because of of great people that believe in our collective vision and working together to make it come true.
What could come after the F5 that makes sense for you?
Well, we announced maybe 9 months ago a project that we coined, our head of design, Nathan Malinek, coined Project Deep Space, which is kind of a funny story. I've been thinking about electrification and how might Hennessey do electrification. I've been thinking about that for as long as Tesla's been around, for 10 plus years. But over time, I thought, okay, the weight of the vehicle, I can't see a sports car or much less a supercar, hypercar weighing 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. So I thought, okay, eventually battery technology will come along and they'll be lighter weight and they'll charge faster and they'll cost less money. Well, we're still not there yet. And so Nathan had just come on board maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, and he was at my house, and we're highly focused on F5. I brought him in. He just did a bang up job on F5 and completing all the details of that car. And so while we're focused on one thing, I try not mentally or to other people to distract ourselves with something else that might dilute our focus and our efforts. So I said, hey, look, I want to share something with you, but after we talk about it, we really can't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it, dreaming about it, because we still have a mission to get the first F5 finished and get those in production. So I said, I want to describe this car to you. And he says, before you describe it, can you grab a pen and a piece of paper? So I go over to my wife's desk and I find a pen. I couldn't find a clean sheet of paper. So I just grabbed like this oversized bank envelope and I said, here, just sketch on the back of that. So as I start describing, he starts sketching. I said, well, my thought is, again, given the whole weight with batteries, electrification, I'm like, well, what if it's not a sports car, hypercar? What if this is a luxury car and it has excuse me, just a quick second here. And it has a long wheelbase, center driving position, but instead of like a McLaren F1 or Gordon Murray's T50, instead of like a 3-seater like Speedtail, what if it has diamond shape? What if it has 4 seats? So you have the center driving position, 2 flanking passenger seats, and then like a seat in the rear. And I'm like, maybe that's we'll call that the mother-in-law seat. Maybe it faces backwards. And Nathan, who came to us from the design department at Embraer, so he designed private aircraft for companies and individuals. He says, no, we can take that seat and we can make that like a zero gravity, a lie flat seat, like something you would have in a really nice Gulfstream plane. I'm like, ooh, I like that. And I said, okay, so this diamond shaped interior, but I said, the other thing that I want to do is I don't want to do, I can't, it's hard for me to do a design or something where somebody else has already done. I'm like, so I've got to be different. So again, I kind of went back to the whole 6x6. I thought, well, if 4 electric motors can make 1,500 to 2,000 horsepower, how much power can we get out of 6 motors? So 6 wheels and the additional traction from the extra axles and the longer wheelbase. So he sketched out this 6-wheel drive, gull wing door, diamond shaped interior. And I said, I think that's, again, he coined the phrase deep space. I don't even think we had a name for it back then. Anyway, I'm like, hey, this is my idea and maybe we'll do this. And we both liked it. And so I took that envelope and I don't know, threw it in my corner of my office or someplace, kind of forgot about it. Fast forward, we do F5. Fast forward, we go to Pebble Beach and we showed 2 cars at Pebble last year. And then we sell out a run. I thought, okay, well, we got some, and we had already begun it. We had Nathan had been with us. Maybe this goes back a couple of years, but after we kind of started getting towards the end of the design phase of F5, Nathan said, well, what are we thinking about for future cars? And I thought, well, we could do internal combustion, maybe electrification. I don't know if I want to do a hybrid because I kind of feel like they're too complicated. And so anyway, over the course of time, we had collectively developed a 10-year product plan. And so we were kind of back and forth in terms of what is the second car. And I really felt like we needed to put our stake in not just in terms of the EV market, but just in terms of sustainability. That's where everything's going, not just in automotive, but the rest of the world. And I felt like this was the new challenge. So if way back when the Venom GT and beating Bugatti was a big challenge, we climbed that mountain. Now, building the Venom F5, we built that car. We sold out our coupes. We're in production. We're building currently 1 unit a month. Next year, that'll kick to 2 a month. And our other big goal is to go out and go 300 plus. That is coming in the not too distant future. But I thought, okay, look, we're going to come out with the Roadster, and we may look at other iterations of F5. But okay, what's after F5? And so I said, okay, it's time to go to the next level with deep space. So we it was October of last year, we shared that story and put a few other sketches out. And I was in the studio yesterday, and I would say the exterior is probably 90% there, and the interior is probably 50%. So we're actively moving ahead. We have orders for deep space from our F5 guys. For F5 guys, they get their F5, they're happy with it. They're like, hey, tell me about deep space. But again, I think with deep space, where it carves out potentially its own, the first car in this segment, I said to my guys, I'm like, well, Koenigsegg has the Gemera, which they coined as a hyper GT. But I said, this could be a GT, but I really think it should be more of a luxury car. So what if it's a hyper luxury car? So we're like, okay, maybe we'll coin the phrase hyper lux. I'm sure at some point Rolls-Royce, maybe Bugatti and others will be building some sort of a luxury car, but this will be, when it comes out, potentially the world's most expensive EV at over $3 million. Very low volume, very exclusive. So I think we decided around 100 cars that we'll build. We'd like to show a full scale design model in the next few years, but we're kind of targeting, building the first production representative car somewhere around 2026. So we're moving quickly in that direction while still, looking at okay, what might car number 3 from Hennessey be? And again, this is his forward-looking vision. And again, I'm almost 60 years old. I'll probably do this to the day I die, but I may not always do this. And so we've really tried to, we obviously have a brand, and now we have a team, but I think that what was really gelled together in the last 3 to 5 years for our company, 31 years in, is a real culture to where, if I drop dead today, I've got people out there that will just keep this thing going. So I think that gives me a lot of peace of mind. Not that I'm worried about when I go out and go fast in the car or whatever, but I think it's really cool to see where Hennessey is going to go, not in just the next 5 or 10 years, but the next 50 to 100 years.
Yeah, for sure. When you think about speed, has speed lost its luster to some extent? I know that after you beat the Bugatti, former boss Wolfgang Durheimer came up to you and said that there weren't many players doing what you were doing, and he thought that it was valuable for Bugatti to do what it was doing. But outside of that, do you think it's lost some of that competitive, crazy, cool, high speed luster?
I think the only thing in my estimation that has any effect on the luster or the desire of going fast, obviously electrification. So the more electric vehicles that are capable of 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. But personally, in the last 20 years, I looked it up one time. The whole 0 to 60 measurement came about back, I don't know, in the 20s or 30s. And I thought 20 years ago, 0 to 60 miles per hour is irrelevant. I feel like now today, again, you have to do this safely. You need to be on a runway or a racetrack. You can't just go out and just make a blast on the highway. That'd be irresponsible. But I feel like performance now is 60 to 160 or 60 to 200. And again, so yeah, I've got a Tesla Plaid. I took a guy for a ride it yesterday, and that launch it'll make you dizzy. But by the time you get to 60, 80 miles an hour, yeah, it's still going quickly. But you get in something like the Venom F5, and I was describing this I was doing a test drive in my Tesla Plaid, doing a video early this year. And I said, look, on a scale of 1 to 10, if the Tesla Plaid the Tesla Plaid is a 3 compared to the Venom F5 being a 10. And I just think that there's something about internal combustion, the sound, the vibration, maybe even the smell to some degree, that electrification, I don't know that it will ever be able to match that. Now, certainly, again, I have an electric car, and I can talk to you at length about what the primarily pros that I see of electrification over the cons or the negatives of whether it's range anxiety or charging networks or whatever. But I still feel like and again, I think that's what's really fueled the growth on our Hennessey performance side of the business. We're modifying vehicles, is that people feel like, well, man, if there's not going to be Hellcats or Exorcists around 10 or 20 years from now, I really want to get one. And so I just feel like within my lifetime, our lifetimes, I don't see internal combustion going away. Again, I have my Tesla. I love it. I've done a few road trips to Austin with it. Their supercharging network works really well. I think we're ways down the road. I have friends with other EVs that are not Teslas, and they talk about, they kind of stay in their little radius of where they can go from their house where they charge. But if they go too far from that, most of the time these charging networks, they don't work. So you go in and you plug in and they're broken, they're vandalized. You got to download some app, you got to put your credit card in there. Tesla, you just go plug it in and it knows what to charge. So I still think we're ways away from people feeling like I can go anywhere with my whatever car. And I'm sure the OEMs and big companies like Shell and others are working on that stuff. But again, at the end of the day, there's nothing like internal combustion. There's nothing like a classic American V8, especially if it's boosted. That's what our customers really like. We'll build, gosh, on our Hennessey performance side of the business, over 700 vehicles this year. And I think if we had more, if we had more access to more vehicles and parts, I mean, our factory scaled to build 1,000 units next year. If we, if Ford is able to get computer chips and roofs for Broncos and things like that. So again, I don't see that going away anytime soon. So maybe, my kids that are in the early to late 20s, how are they going to feel about cars, when they're my age, 30 years from now? I don't know, but I'm just still looking at. I still feel like, at least in America, I mean, other parts of the world where China can mandate and say everybody has to drive an EV, but at least in America, for the next 25, 30 years, I'm guessing it turns out to be 60-30, 60-40 or 70-30, one way EV versus internal combustion. And I think a big part of that will always be driven by just the visceral feel of that.
Yeah, I agree with you, John, wholeheartedly. A couple final things. Culture, Hennessey and culture. This show is called Cars and Culture. I would argue that Hennessey has built a culture, certainly has a culture, but also has created one.
It's yeah, it's funny. I don't think about it that often. I do think of it in terms of the context of within the company. But when I do go to events, I mean, I go to Barrett Jackson, some guy, a customer of ours, who has the Hennessey logo tattooed on his arm. Look, I think we just want to be authentic and honest about who we are. We're American. We're our head of design coined a really cool phrase that the American dream never sleeps, and I believe that's true. And another thing that I say is the American dream isn't just for Americans; it's for everybody. And in terms of wanting to have a better life for our kids, a better life for our families, a better business for our employees. And I think whether it's that or just our passion for performance or just, every now and then, doing something stupid with the car and going out and doing burnouts or going really fast.
Like your father did.
Yeah, like my dad did, like my kids have done after me. And again, we want to do that in a safe and responsible way. But I think that if that has a positive effect on, American culture or culture globally, we were just over at Goodwin and we was surprised to have so many fans and so many people in England who know who we are and what we do. And I think if that resonates with them and they want to buy into that, I think that that's a really cool thing. And I could think back, we had a client back in 2008. We built a twin turbo Viper for. He was from Russia, and we sent his car back to Russia, and we went to Western Siberia, so the middle of the country, so 3,000 miles from Moscow, and we're out there for this Russian drag racing championship, and nobody there spoke English. There was like 10,000 Russians, and it was raining in the stands, and the cars obviously couldn't race, but these 10,000 fans, they stayed in the stands during the rain. And I go down in the pits, and again, I don't speak their language, they don't speak mine. But when it came to, like, one guy was having issue with his tires, and we gave him some help, and he came and gave us a big hug. And I just feel like, it's just cool how the automotive passion can bring people together from all walks of life, male, female, doesn't matter what your background is. But if we can agree that we like a cool car, we go for a ride in a cool car, we see a cool car go down the drag strip or something like that. I just think that if we have some small influence in terms of that part of the culture, I'll feel very blessed and honored that we had that little bit of influence.
I'd say you have more than that, John. Thank you for sharing your culture and your cars on this program. And it has been an absolute pleasure to hear your story.
Thanks, Jason. We'll see you after the F1 race.
We'll see you soon, John.
Okay, thanks.